With increase in number of cases in Nigeria on the rise, the different tiers of government are beginning to increase measures deployed in fighting the spread of coronavirus in the country.
That's correct. And there are now confirmed 46 cases of COVID-19 in Nigeria, with 1 death recorded so far. One of the measures now being deployed is the lockdown of activities, especially in Lagos State, which will begin on Thursday, the 26th of March.
Based on this new development, some critics and analysts are saying that by now, the federal government should be able to declare a state of emergency and possibly put in an act in place that will bind everyone, citing the United States. Citing the United States as an example, where Trump declared a national emergency and invoked the Defense Production Act. To some others, being legal at a time of national pandemic is unnecessary. So joining us now to discuss the legality of a lockdown, especially in Nigeria, and most especially in Lagos, which begins tomorrow, is Inibehe Effiong, a legal practitioner. It's a pleasure having you, Inibehe Effiong. Adesua?
Yes, thank you so much, Inibehe, for joining us this morning. Some people have said why we still have religious leaders and individuals go about business as usual is because there's no legal backing to this directive or orders given by the government. Tell me, do you need the law to back executive directives and executive orders issued at a time like this?
Well, the perception that government can enforce, secure, or compel compliance with the directive they have issued without putting in place what I have described as proper legal framework is outrightly and totally misconceived. To begin with, the coercive power of the state, by that I mean the capacity of a government to compel people to do certain things or to refrain from doing certain things, is neither derived from common sense, morality, or ethics. The coercive power of the state is founded on law. When law is absent, all that the government can do is to appeal to the conscience of the people. And conscience has always been a subjective concept. Okay? It is not objective. The government can only say, okay, be reasonable, be responsible, apply common sense, do what you are supposed to do as a responsible citizen. But you see, the very essence of social contract, why people have to repose their collective responsibility on an institution or a state to exercise power on their behalf and lead them, is because man, naturally, the natural instinct of man is selfishness, according to Thomas Hobbes. So you cannot have a situation where a state will expect that people on their own will naturally do what they are supposed to do when there is no sanction. And let me break it down. And I'll start by even the government itself, for you to see how unserious, how careless and reckless this present administration is, whether at the federal or the state level, in addressing this pandemic. Your medium, Arise TV, confirmed yesterday a report by other media organizations that the chief of staff to the president has been tested positive. Now, this is a man who went to Germany to enter into some negotiation regarding power sector and so on. He came back. Did he isolate himself? If he did, how come that 3 of his staff are now reported to also be infected? How come that the State House is not being limited, access is not being limited? How come that other persons who had access to him are now being asked to embark on self-isolation? The same chief of staff wrote a letter to the Speaker of the House of Representatives that some members of the House of Reps have refused to subject themselves to screening, have refused to comply with the advisory and directive issued by the government. Again, Mr. Garba Shehu, the spokesperson of the president, when the government has come out publicly to issue guidelines and directives, defied that order and went to deliver a public lecture attended by hundreds of persons, contrary to the guidelines of the Nigerian Center for Disease Control. I can give other examples that we have seen. The point I am making is this. It is not enough for people to be sentimental and say, apply common sense, when those who are in positions of authority have not shown that common sense, when those who are supposed to lead by example are the ones that are contravening, the ones that are violating the same policies and advice that the government has given.
Okay, Inibehe, this is not a focus on the government. This is a focus on what we have at hand, coronavirus. It's ravaging. It's everywhere. And we're talking about a possible lockdown. The reason you have given, very valid. You talked about a social contract, just like Jean-Jacques Rousseau. If you read the social contract very well by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, there are caveats. And the caveat is sort of like an emergency like this. What should we be doing as regards this at this point in time? What should the government even do? Because you say, okay, according to the law, they're supposed to get injunctions by the law as regards this. How should we go about it? Because it's the collective we all want. We want it to be better. Let's focus on that.
This is the point. It is a bit ironic, and tragically so, to say in one breath that we have a national emergency, and in another breath, you are resisting my proposition that the time has come for the president to exercise the power vested in him under Section 305 of the Constitution to declare a national emergency on grounds of public health and public safety. Indeed, by virtue of subsection 4 of that Section 305, the president can declare a national emergency by stating the terms of that emergency when the Constitution says there is clear and present danger to public safety. The outbreak of coronavirus has clearly endangered public safety. There is no dispute about that. So I get a bit irritated, I'm sorry to say, when people tell me that, look, why are you talking about legality? Why are you talking about putting the laws in place when we are facing a national emergency? And at the same time, you are saying you don't need to declare a national emergency. So this contradiction underlies the point I am making, that until you have a legal framework, there is no way you can compel people to comply with what they are supposed to do. And look at what happened just on Sunday, when some religious leaders went about holding services in clear defiance of the government. Why have they done that? Because there is no sanction. Because there is no punishment. So let us stop talking about common sense. It is not everybody in Nigeria that is sensible. So the argument of common sense presupposes that all Nigerians have sense. And for me, that cannot be a valid argument. That is total fallacy. People say, oh, morality. Come, are we all moral in this country and we're this corrupt? So the point is this. If you want people to comply with what the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, with what the Lagos State government has done, why not invoke the law? If you cannot declare a state of emergency, which for me shouldn't take a responsible government more than to ask. Look, I can draft it for them if they don't know how to draft a proclamation. I am making an offer free to the government. But beyond the national emergency, I am also making the point that under the Quarantine Act of 1926, the president has the sole authority to issue regulations to cater and address infectious diseases when there is an outbreak. Now, that law says when the president fails to do so, Section 8 of that act allows governors the power to exercise the power already vested in the president. As I speak to you today, none of the 36 governors have done that. Not even the Lagos State government. And for me, that is particularly painful. Because this is an administration, for the first time since 1960, that has the highest number of lawyers in a cabinet. 12. 4 senior advocates, the vice president, you have Fashola, you have Festus Keyamo, and one other. And they don't know what to do clearly.
Okay, so Inibehe, now, we have got into the crux of the matter. We should call for a national emergency as regards that. I mean, what are the powers that section of the Constitution brings with it? If you declare a national emergency now, what power do you have? So can you shut the country down when you declare that? Can you shut everybody down? Can you put the military on probably everywhere to ensure that this is complied with? I hear some private sector companies are still working. As of this morning, I mean, pretty much the partial shutdown takes place tomorrow. What should you be telling those private companies?
They have the right to work. Look, there is no president in Nigeria today. There is no governor in Nigeria that can stop me from going anywhere I want to go. If I choose to stay at home, it is out of my own volition. Governor Sanwo-Olu cannot stop me, cannot compel me. The Commissioner of Police cannot stop me because there is no law. They can only appeal to my conscience. So what I am saying is that those corporate organizations, I encourage them to do what they are supposed to do as responsible corporate organizations, as part of their corporate social responsibility. But beyond the sentiment of appealing to them, let us have a legal framework that will compel them to do so. Because in the absence of a legal framework, in the absence of a law to that regard, look, we can talk from now till tomorrow. Look at, and I've given examples, just on Monday, barely 48 hours ago, when Boris Johnson got tired that British people were not listening to the advisory of the government, that people were still gathering, people were still going on parties. You know what he did? Just on Monday, the British Parliament had to enact emergency laws. This is our colonial master. We can't be no more than them. The United States that we claim to have copied our system from. You know what they have done? President Trump declared a national emergency. Not less than 48 governors, 48 states of the 50 in the US have also declared emergency. Beyond that, they have also passed laws, including the Family First Emergency Response Act, the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. Trump has also invoked the Defense Production Act. Just yesterday, they are even working on another legislation. So when people say laws do not matter, laws are not necessary, look, all responsible countries have realized that human beings naturally...
Stay with us. We'll go on a quick break. We'll be back to talk some more. Welcome back to the Morning Show here on the Rise News. We still have Inibehe Effiong, a legal practitioner, who is discussing the legality of the state of things in the country, Nigeria, as we near total lockdown. Some would say we're still not there yet. Mr. Inibehe, thank you so much for staying with us. You've talked about lack of leadership so far and lack of law, legality, or the legality of what is going on. But we do know that while government has a responsibility to lead, the people also have a greater responsibility to take action when it comes to their health. And so when this situation arises and the nature of the virus spreading, it is important that we stress that individuals must also take responsibility for their health. But talking about law, there is no state of emergency declared by the president yet. There is no law backing the directives by the state governments. What do we do really? Another Sunday beckons, and I just asked the Christian Association of Nigeria president, should these churches go ahead and flout this directive by the governors again? Would it be okay for governors to go ahead and seal these churches and religious houses?
They don't have the power to do that. I encourage churches to comply. But as of today, as I'm speaking to you right now, no governor, no president in this country has the power, no police officer has the power to invade any religious place for the purpose of compliance, except they make a law to that regard. And let us not be sentimental about this. And I wanted to make this point that in 2016, the government of Lagos State issued a directive requiring residents of Lagos to stay at home during environmental sanitation. A certain Faith Okafor was arrested for defying the order of the government and governor of Lagos State. The matter went to court. And the question before the court was, can any person be punished for violating the order or the directive of a governor? Two, does the directive of a governor have the force of law? The matter was tried at the High Court up to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal unanimously said that the arrest of Faith Okafor for flouting the order of the governor of Lagos State was illegal because nobody, and Section 36 subsection 10 of the Constitution is clear, that nobody can be prosecuted or convicted except for an act that has been made a crime under a written law. So while I encourage judges to comply, the reality and the truth of the matter is that if any of these charges being invaded by the police choose to go to court, I can tell you there is a very high likelihood that the government will lose. That is the truth. And look at it. If you arrest them, what will you do to them? Can you prosecute them under what law? What will you charge them for? So this is why we shouldn't be sentimental. You know why? Because under Chapter 4 of the Constitution, there are some rights that have been made fundamental rights. As Section 45 says, that if the government is to derogate from that right, to restrict those rights, including the right to freedom of association and peaceful assembly under Section 40, the right to freedom of movement under Section 41, the right to freedom of religion under Section 36, the Constitution says it has to be by a law. Not only a law, the Constitution says that law must pass a test. What test? It must be reasonably justifiable in a democratic society. So when people say you don't need law, the question is, if I choose not to do what I'm supposed to do, what can the government do? Nothing. Okay, so let us stop wasting time to say that people should apply common sense. I already said earlier, why do we have psychiatric hospitals in Nigeria? There is one in Yaba. There is because not everybody is sane. Okay, that is why you need the compulsive power of the state to force people to do what is right.
I'd like to come in here, Inibehe, I get your point. Very valid point made. I want to take you back to the Quarantine Act of 26. The Quarantine Act of 26 was set up as a reaction to something like this that happened that affected Nigeria, the colonial Nigeria, in 1919. That's the Spanish influenza. But since then, we have not tested those laws because we've never had an outbreak like this. Even Ebola wasn't as much as this. Quickly, what's the advice you can give as regards, revisiting that act or implementing the act or trying to look at the act and see how they can relate to what we have today so we can get this passed very quickly, so we can settle the legal angle of it as we fight this very, very nefarious disease?
Look, people say there is no time for the National Assembly to pass a law. I have said it, we don't need a fresh law. The Quarantine Act of 1926 has catered for this. But what does that act say? That act is useless except the president issues regulations. Indeed, under Section 5 of the Quarantine Act, the punishment for violating the regulations, not the act. There is nothing in the act that can be violated. The act only says the president may by regulations. The punishment is 200 naira or term of imprisonment for 6 months or both, where the regulations are violated. Now, since, unfortunately, we have an absentee president, okay? I said that without apology. Because till date, not till date,
we repudiate that.
Address the country.
No, he has come out to address the country. He circulated a message. In Inibehe, we totally repudiate that here. We have a president on ground. He has come out to address the nation. The videos are making the rounds about everybody taking precaution.
That is not an address. President Trump speaks to America daily. Why should the standard continue to be lowered in this country? So if the president is not available to exercise his power, I am calling on the governor, starting with Governor Sanwo-Olu, please direct your Attorney General and Ministry of Justice. It shouldn't take them up to Friday to draft regulations to give effect to these policies and advisories that you have made. Until you do that, there is nothing the government can do to force people to comply. Since we have the Quarantine Act that gives the president the power to issue regulations to guide how these things are supposed to be done, and the president is not available to do so, Governor Sanwo-Olu, why can't you start? Why can't you set an example? Lagos has been setting an example in law reform. Why should it be different now? Let the Lagos state government, it shouldn't take a day. So when people say there is no time, I laugh at them. It shouldn't take a day to issue these regulations. When these regulations are issued, anybody that violates it, there will be a legal basis to punish them. There will be a legal basis to enforce them. But until you do that, the reality today is that it remains what it is, an advice. You depend on morality. Those who are immoral, those who don't have common sense, they can choose to violate the directive. That is the truth. So let us not say, oh, there is no time. Just yesterday, the House of Reps and the Senate sat in a plenary which they have now adjourned. So if they sat yesterday, why can't they call on the president to do what is necessary? So I feel sad about this.
I can see that, and I see you're very passionate, but let's not derogate those with mental illness as well, saying that they are in Yaba. But very quickly, explain.
I just made that point to reiterate that we shouldn't expect everybody to know what is right.
Yes, but
it is not a derogation,
as well, because a lot of people do have mental illness, and it's just not about being insane. Explain to me the role of executive orders and pronouncements, and why that cannot work at a time like this. Very briefly, please.
I'm not aware any state has issued, but this morning, my attention was drawn to an advisory, luckily issued by the Attorney General of Ekiti State. That seems to be the first example, but when I read through it, sadly, it didn't satisfy the things I'm talking about. It only gives an advisory to the police that if you deliberately infect someone, you can be charged for murder. That, for me, is even laughable, because how will you determine who has deliberately infected who? It is not too difficult. Let them do what they are supposed to do. But executive orders can be issued. They remain what they are, executive orders. Those orders do not have the force of law. I doubt whether contravention of executive orders can be the basis for criminal sanction. But why do you need executive orders when you can simply issue regulations pursuant to the Quarantine Act? This is not rocket science. There is no state in Nigeria without an Attorney General, without a Solicitor General, without Ministry of Justice. It is in times like this, that those agencies, those institutions of state are supposed to guide the government on what they are supposed to do. So part of the points the media should make is to ask the Attorney Generals of each of the states, including Lagos, why they have not given government the proper advice and why they have not directed government on the right thing that they are supposed to do. So this is also an indictment on all the Attorney Generals in this country, including the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation. It may be, possibly, that the governors have not been properly advised. They may have told the governors that, look, you don't need a law, you don't need regulations. But this is a test for them. If you are saying I am wrong, that what I'm saying here is misleading, please arrest a single person and charge that person to court. Let us see.
Inibehe, we're wrapping things up now, but I implore you to do this as we wrap it up, as we come to the end of the show. Thank you so much for coming. I implore you to do this. Do a draft of this and probably put it on your Twitter. Let's even see what it will look like.